Good evening. Tonight, we leave behind the castles of Europe, the crowded cities of the East, and the comforts of the modern world. Instead, we travel to a place that once seemed endless, a place of opportunity, adventure, danger, and dreams. Welcome to the American frontier. Imagine standing beneath an enormous sky, a sky so vast it seems to stretch forever. Before you lies an ocean of grass, rolling endlessly toward the horizon. No highways, no cities, no power lines, only nature, wild and untamed. For centuries, much of North America remained unknown to European settlers. To those living along the Atlantic coast, the western lands felt mysterious, almost mythical. Stories spread about endless resources, rich farmland, and opportunities for a better life. But reaching those lands would never be easy. The frontier demanded courage, patience, and sacrifice. As thousands of settlers looked westward, they saw hope. A chance to build something new. A chance to start again. What they found was both beautiful and unforgiving. And the story of the Wild West was about to begin. Long before railroads crossed America, the Great Plains stretched across the continent, millions of acres of open grassland, a landscape unlike anything most settlers had ever seen. There were no fences, no roads, no towns, only vast open spaces. During spring, wildflowers covered the prairies. In summer, tall grass danced beneath powerful winds, and during winter, blizzards transformed the landscape into a frozen wilderness. The plains were home to incredible wildlife. Buffalo roamed in enormous herds, sometimes numbering in the millions. Wolves hunted across the grasslands, eagles soared overhead, and rivers carved their way through the wilderness. To newcomers, the land seemed endless, beautiful, and intimidating. Many settlers would spend weeks crossing these prairies, day after day seeing little change in the horizon. The frontier felt enormous and often lonely, yet it offered something many people desperately wanted: opportunity. When many people think about the Wild West, they often imagine cowboys, sheriffs, and outlaws. But long before cowboys arrived, the American West was already home to many thriving cultures. Native American nations had lived across the continent for generations. Some communities followed buffalo migrations. Others built permanent settlements. Each nation possessed its own traditions, languages, beliefs, and history. These societies understood the land deeply. They knew where to find water, how to survive harsh winters, and how to navigate enormous distances. The West was not empty. It was alive, filled with people who had called it home for centuries. As settlers began moving westward, these worlds would increasingly collide. And the future of the frontier would be shaped by both cooperation and conflict. During the 19th century, the idea of moving west captured the imagination of thousands of Americans. Families packed their belongings, sold their homes, and prepared for journeys that could last months. Most traveled in covered wagons, simple wooden vehicles pulled by oxen or horses. Life on the trail was difficult. Dust covered everything. Weather changed suddenly, rivers blocked progress, and accidents were common, yet people continued moving west. Many hoped to claim land, others searched for wealth, some simply dreamed of a better future. Each wagon carried more than supplies. It carried hope, the belief that somewhere beyond the horizon, a new life was waiting. Frontier life demanded resilience. Settlers built homes from available materials, often using logs, earth, or rough-cut timber. Every task required effort. Water had to be collected, food had to be grown, shelter had to be maintained. There were few conveniences and little outside help. Medical care was limited, supplies could be difficult to obtain, and isolation was common. A single storm could destroy months of hard work. Yet communities slowly formed. Neighbours supported one another, shared resources, and celebrated small victories. Life remained difficult, but the frontier also inspired determination. The belief that hard work could build a better future. Despite the dangers, people continued moving west. Why? Because hope is powerful. Many families dreamed of owning land. Others sought economic opportunity. Some wished to escape poverty. Others wanted adventure. The West represented possibility, a chance to begin again. Of course, reality was often more complicated than the dream. Success was never guaranteed. Many struggled, many failed, but the belief in opportunity remained strong, and that belief helped shape the history of the American frontier. As more settlers arrived, the West began changing rapidly. Soon, one discovery would transform everything. Gold, and with it, a new chapter in American history. The gold rush changes everything by the late 1840s. The American frontier was about to experience one of the most dramatic events in its history. A discovery, a rumor, a dream, the discovery of gold in California. At first, only a few people knew, but news travels quickly when fortune is involved. Stories spread across America, then across the world. People heard whispers of rivers filled with gold, of ordinary men becoming rich overnight, of fortunes waiting beneath the soil. And suddenly, everyone wanted to go west. Farmers left their fields, sailors abandoned ships, workers quit jobs, families sold possessions. Thousands prepared for a journey into the unknown. The gold rush had begun, and America would never be the same. In January of 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall made an unexpected discovery. While working near Sutter's Mill in California, he noticed something shining in the water. Tiny golden flakes. At first, few understood the importance of the discovery. But soon, the truth became impossible to hide. Gold had been found. Real gold. News spread slowly at first, then exploded across the country. Newspapers printed stories, travelers carried rumors, and within months, thousands began preparing for the journey west. For many Americans, gold represented more than wealth. It represented hope, a chance to escape hardship, a chance to build a new future, and that hope would attract people from every corner of the world. The year was 1849, and thousands of people began moving westward. These travelers became known as the 49ers. Many traveled by wagon. Others crossed dangerous mountain trails. Some sailed around South America, a journey that could take months. The roads were crowded, trails became busy, ports filled with travelers. Everyone shared the same dream. Finding gold. Some left behind comfortable lives. Others risked everything they owned. Not everyone understood the dangers. Disease spread along travel routes. Accidents were common. Supplies often ran short. Yet the dream remained powerful, because somewhere beyond the horizon, fortune seemed to be waiting.
Wherever gold was discovered, people followed, and where people gathered, towns appeared. Almost overnight, small camps became villages. Villages became bustling towns. Wooden buildings rose quickly. Hotels, general stores, blacksmith shops, restaurants, and saloons. Many boomtowns grew faster than anyone expected. Thousands of people arrived seeking fortune, yet few stayed long, because many boomtowns depended entirely on nearby gold discoveries. Once the gold disappeared, people moved on, leaving behind empty buildings and ghost towns that still exist today. Many people imagined gold mining would be easy. Find gold, become rich, live comfortably. Reality was very different. Mining required long hours, hard labor, and enormous patience. Prospectors spent entire days standing in cold water, searching gravel, digging soil, and hoping to discover something valuable. Most found very little. Many found nothing at all. Only a small percentage became wealthy. For most miners, the gold rush was not a shortcut to riches. It was another difficult job, filled with uncertainty and endless hope. As night falls across the frontier, thousands of prospectors sit beside campfires, thinking, dreaming, hoping. Some imagine returning home wealthy. Others imagine building businesses, buying land, or starting families. The gold rush was about more than gold. It was about possibility, the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And although most prospectors never became rich, their journeys helped shape the American West. New towns appeared, new roads were built, and the frontier continued expanding. But another legendary figure was about to emerge, a symbol of the Wild West itself, the American cowboy. When most people imagine the Wild West, they picture a cowboy, a rider beneath a vast sky, a hat shielding the sun, a horse carrying him across endless grasslands. The cowboy became one of the most famous symbols in American history, but the real story was very different from Hollywood movies. Cowboys were not wealthy adventurers. Most were hard-working laborers. Their lives were filled with long days, dangerous conditions, and endless responsibility. Yet, despite the hardships, the cowboy became a legend, a symbol of freedom, independence, and the American frontier. Tonight, we discover what life was really like for the men who spent their days on the open range. The image of the cowboy is famous around the world, yet many people misunderstand who cowboys actually were. Most cowboys worked on cattle ranches. They cared for livestock, maintained fences, repaired equipment, and spent long hours outdoors. Their work required skill, patience, and endurance. Cowboys came from many different backgrounds. Some were born in America. Others came from Mexico. Some were formerly enslaved people seeking opportunity. Many were young men searching for work, regardless of their origins. Life on the range demanded dedication. The romantic image of the cowboy often hides the reality. Most days were not exciting. Most days were simply hard work. A cowboy's day often began before sunrise, long before the heat of the afternoon, long before the cattle became active. The first task was preparing horses, checking equipment, and organizing the day's work. Breakfast was usually simple: coffee, beans, bread, or dried meat. Then came hours of riding, monitoring cattle, watching for injuries, searching for missing animals, and responding to unexpected problems. Much of the day involved patience. The cowboy spent countless hours in the saddle, under the sun, through rain, and sometimes through dangerous storms. It was demanding work, but it helped shape the economy of the American West. One of the most famous activities in Wild West history was the cattle drive. Thousands of cattle needed to be moved, sometimes hundreds of miles. Cowboys guided these herds across vast distances. The journey could last weeks or even months. Days followed a steady rhythm: ride, watch, guide, protect, then repeat. Storms could scatter cattle. Rivers could delay progress. Accidents could happen at any moment. Yet successful cattle drives connected ranches with railroads, and railroads connected the West with growing cities across America. The cowboy became an essential part of this system, helping transform the frontier economy. The open range offered freedom, but it also offered isolation. Many cowboys spent weeks away from towns, away from family, away from familiar comforts. The landscape became their workplace, and often their home. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction. At night, stars filled the sky, brighter than most modern people have ever seen. The silence could feel peaceful, yet it could also feel lonely. Cowboys learned to depend on one another. Friendships formed on the trail because cooperation often meant survival. Life on the trail was never completely safe. Weather could change without warning. Thunderstorms rolled across the plains, lightning illuminated the night sky, and frightened cattle sometimes stampeded. A stampede could be terrifying. Thousands of animals moving at full speed, dust filling the air, chaos spreading across the landscape. Cowboys worked together to prevent disaster, using skill, experience, and courage. The dangers were real. Yet cowboys continued their work because the frontier depended on it. And through years of hard labor, the cowboy became one of America's most enduring legends. But the Wild West was not only home to cowboys, it was also home to some of the most famous outlaws in history. As the American frontier expanded, another type of legend began to appear. Not ranchers, not pioneers, not cowboys, but outlaws, men whose names would echo through American history. Some became famous for robberies, others for daring escapes, and a few became larger than life through stories and rumors. The Wild West was a place of opportunity, but it was also a place where law often struggled to keep pace with growth. New towns appeared quickly. Sheriffs were few. Distances were enormous. And in that environment, certain individuals discovered that crime could be profitable, or at least they believed it could. Tonight, we meet some of the most famous outlaws in American history and separate the myths from reality. Few names are more famous in Wild West history than Billy the Kid, even today. More than a century later, his story continues to fascinate people. Born Henry McCarty, Billy lived a short and turbulent life. He became involved in conflicts throughout the New Mexico Territory. Stories described him as clever, charismatic, and difficult to capture. Over time, legends grew larger than facts. Books exaggerated events. Movies added drama. And Billy the Kid became one of America's most recognizable outlaws. Yet behind the legend stood a young man living in a dangerous frontier world, a world where survival was often uncertain. Another famous outlaw was Jesse James. His name became known throughout America. Newspapers followed his activities closely. Stories spread rapidly. Some viewed him as a criminal. Others viewed him as a folk hero. The reality was far more complex. Jesse James participated in robberies, train robberies, bank robberies, and other crimes that captured public attention. As news spread, his reputation grew, and with each retelling, the legend became larger. The Wild West had entered the age of celebrity outlaws. By the late 19th century, another famous outlaw emerged, Butch Cassidy, alongside his companions. He became associated with a series of robberies across the American West. Unlike many outlaws, Butch Cassidy gained a reputation for intelligence and careful planning. Stories about him spread widely and eventually became part of American folklore. Like many Wild West legends, separating truth from myth can be difficult, yet the fascination remains. Because the frontier was a place where extraordinary stories often became reality. Bank robberies became one of the most famous symbols of the Wild West. Movies often portray them as exciting adventures. Reality was very different. Most robberies were dangerous, unpredictable, and often unsuccessful. Law enforcement improved steadily, communication became faster, and criminals faced increasing challenges. Yet stories of robberies captured public imagination. They represented risk, adventure, and rebellion against authority, which is why they remain a powerful part of Wild West mythology even today. When people think about the Wild West, many imagine constant gunfights, outlaws, and dramatic showdowns. But real frontier life was usually much quieter. Most people worked hard, raised families, built businesses, and tried to create stable communities. The Wild West certainly had danger, but it also had farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, railroad workers, and countless ordinary people. Hollywood created many unforgettable stories, yet the true history of the American West is often even more fascinating because it tells the story of real people facing real challenges while helping shape the future of America.
As the sun disappeared beyond the western horizon, the frontier transformed. The heat of the day faded, lanterns flickered to life, and Wild West towns began to glow beneath the night sky. After long days of work, people gathered in town. Cowboys arrived from nearby ranches, travelers stepped down from stagecoaches, merchants closed their shops, and communities came together. Nighttime brought a different energy, a chance to relax, to socialize, and sometimes to seek entertainment. For many frontier towns, the evening was the busiest part of the day, and nowhere was this more visible than inside the local saloon. Few places symbolized the Wild West more than the saloon. Nearly every frontier town had one, sometimes several. Inside, travelers found food, conversation, and entertainment. Card games were popular, so were stories. News traveled quickly through saloons. A traveler arriving from another territory could bring information from hundreds of miles away. For isolated communities, this connection to the outside world was valuable. While Hollywood often focuses on dramatic scenes, most evenings were far less exciting. People gathered, talked, shared experiences, and relaxed after difficult days of work. As towns grew larger, communities needed order. This responsibility often fell to sheriffs and lawmen. Their job was not easy. Frontier towns changed rapidly. New arrivals appeared constantly, and resources were limited. Sheriffs handled disputes, protected businesses, and helped maintain peace. Some became famous, others remained largely forgotten. Yet together, they played an important role in transforming frontier settlements into stable communities. Without them, many towns would have struggled to survive. Justice on the frontier was often complicated. Towns grew faster than institutions, distances were enormous, communication was slow. Yet communities worked hard to establish rules. Courts appeared, local governments formed, and settlements gradually became more organized. The Wild West was not simply a place of chaos, it was also a place of growth, a place where people attempted to build functioning communities despite difficult circumstances. And over time, those efforts helped create lasting towns and cities across the American West. As midnight approached, the town gradually became quieter. Businesses closed, lanterns dimmed, and streets emptied. The sounds of conversation faded, leaving only distant footsteps, a horse shifting in its stall, or the gentle wind moving through the town. For frontier families, night brought an opportunity to rest. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, and new opportunities. But for now, the town slept beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Not every frontier town survived. Some flourished briefly, then disappeared. Mining towns were especially vulnerable. When gold or silver ran out, people often left. Businesses closed, buildings stood empty, and communities vanished. Today, Many ghost towns still remain, silent reminders of the Wild West. Walking through them feels like stepping into another era, a moment frozen in time, a reminder that the frontier was constantly changing, growing, expanding, and sometimes disappearing altogether. Yet even abandoned towns continue telling stories, stories of ambition, adventure, and the pursuit of opportunity. Every era eventually comes to an end. The Wild West was no exception. For decades, the frontier had represented freedom, opportunity, adventure, and uncertainty. But change was coming. Powerful change, new technology, new industries, and new forms of transportation were transforming America. The isolated frontier was becoming connected. The vast distances that once separated communities were shrinking, and slowly. The legendary Wild West began fading into history, not disappearing completely, but evolving into something new. Few inventions changed the American West more than the railroad. Before railroads, travel was slow, difficult, and unpredictable. A journey that once required weeks could now take only days. Goods moved faster, people traveled farther, and isolated communities became connected. New towns appeared along railroad routes, businesses expanded, opportunities increased. The railroad transformed the frontier economy. And with each new track laid across the landscape, the Old West moved one step closer to modernization. For generations, the frontier had been defined by open space, endless grasslands, unrestricted movement, and vast cattle ranges. Then came barbed wire, simple, inexpensive, and incredibly effective. Suddenly, land could be fenced, property boundaries became clear, ranchers protected resources, farmers protected crops. The open range began disappearing, and with it, one of the defining features of traditional cowboy life. The frontier was changing, perhaps more quickly than anyone expected. The cowboy did not disappear overnight, but the world around him changed. Railroads replaced long cattle drives, fences divided open land, towns grew larger, technology advanced, many cowboys adapted, others found new careers. Yet the image of the cowboy endured, because the cowboy represented something larger: freedom, self-reliance, and the spirit of the frontier. Even as the Old West faded, the legend remained alive. As the real Wild West disappeared, a new version emerged, Hollywood's version. Movies transformed cowboys into heroes, outlaws into legends, and frontier towns into dramatic stages. Millions of people around the world learned about the West through film. Some stories were accurate, many were exaggerated, yet the impact was enormous. The Wild West became part of global culture, a symbol recognized far beyond America's borders. And while Hollywood changed many details, it helped preserve interest in one of the most fascinating chapters of American history. And now, the frontier grows quiet. The trains have passed, the saloons have closed, the cattle rest peacefully beneath the stars. Across the vast American West, silence settles over the prairie. The age of cowboys and pioneers has become history, yet their stories remain. Stories of courage, adventure, hope, and determination. As you rest comfortably tonight, imagine the distant sound of hoofbeats fading into the darkness, the gentle wind moving across endless grasslands, and the vast western sky stretching overhead. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history of the Wild West. Close your eyes, relax, and drift peacefully into sleep. Good night, and until our next journey through history, sleep well. The end. Complete story. The history of the Wild West while you sleep.